Hi guys. I know we are what's standing between you and lunch, so I promise we'll be super efficient with our time. So how's everyone's advertising week going? Amazing. Lots of caffeine, right? So how many of you guys in the room are the actual people who meet with companies and end up making the recommendations or decisions on what your company will go with and who you'll work with? Anybody? None of you? Excellent. I made some finger points. I got you back there. Excellent. So we all know here AI is incredible. It's changing businesses, it changes the way that we work. But when it comes to who you partner with, when it comes to integrating AI into your marketing strategies, your back end, it's really hard to find that right partner who's going to deliver value now and in the longer term. So we want to talk about today is how do you find that right partner and what are the things to look out for. So maybe we start off with you guys introducing yourselves, what you do, and what excites you most about AI.
I'm Nick Cabot, Associate Partner, Director of Digital Strategy at VSA Partners. I think what excites me most about AI is, from that earlier panel, that idea of the flying cars and the future that the Jetsons promised, that we're going to get there in my lifetime, which I think is pretty exciting from that perspective.
Awesome.
I'm Kate Hiranaka. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at BeReal. I think the thing that excites me most about AI and at BeReal, what we get super excited about is just the creative potential for it. That it lets us create more personalized and more relevant messaging for people, but that it's still kind of untapped with how creative you can get with it and really using that as a tool. So I think that's where we get really excited about AI.
Lung Wong. I lead business development around data for Merkle, and I really like AI as two opportunities, one within experience and one within results. And I think that it's going to find its home in a various degrees within that. So that's how I kind of look at AI.
Well, I think Jason from Havas, I think we live in an AI-driven world now, and the opportunity to bring those expectations that consumers have regarding the value of that from a personalization, from the standpoint of data meaning something, is at the forefront of what brands are trying to answer. And I also think a critical point is around privacy, and I think to the question that was at the end of the last panel, brands themselves have to understand the value proposition in terms of what they give to their customers in that exchange.
So you guys have talked about value proposition, understanding what you want to do, and you've talked about results a little bit. How has AI, which has come so far so fast, impacted your roles in your companies in the short period of time you've been working with it?
I guess I'll go first. Well, it's definitely the buzzword of the moment. I mean, I tell you, the phones are ringing, everybody's trying to figure it out. I'm sure all you guys have the same thing. Defining what the value is I think, the challenge. And there is a discussion of how we use partners and what do we do ourselves, and that's a big part of it right now. It's a test and learn for a lot of our clients. Some are coming at it from the standpoint of, should I do this myself? How do I plug this into CRM? How do I plug this into my media strategy? How do I develop experiences? And it's really at the cornerstone of the modern CMO's language. And answering those questions in a way that they can realize that benefit, either through testing and then measuring, is what I think we're all here about today.
I would agree, and I think that I recently left the retail side of the business. I was on the retail side for 4 years, and a lot of times was spent on the customer experience side, and now switching on to more of a traditional digital agency front. I think that AI is heavily ingrained within media buying and thrown out there as much as programmatic is in AI, but I think where it's evasive is really about what we're all talking about is the vendors that kind of throw it out there assuming that AI is going to solve a problem, and it really can't solve a problem. It's what can the test be done with it.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing for thinking about AI is really looking at it as a tool. And I think what it's done for us is it's given us just, instead of having to code everything to the nth degree, you kind of are opened up a little bit more to know, okay, this is a tool for us to bring in some information to make things more relevant to people, but then we can spend the rest of our time thinking about other parts of the creative experience that we can spend more of our time on. I mean, the power of AI, and this is what somebody said to me a while back when it was first kind of becoming more and more of a buzzword, is just that there are things that computers are better at than humans, and we should let them do that so that we can focus on the things that we're really good at. So that kind of balancing act has been interesting, but it's definitely opened us up to spend more time on creativity than just implementation, which is exciting.
And so, I mean, I'll be really transparent in terms of my day-to-day life with AI. In the workplace, my favorite use of AI is the Google autocomplete feature for search, and knowing which contact to put in the to field, right? And that's a very simple example of AI, but I think it's a really practical one, and one that demonstrates the fact that it's all about utility and having a very clear use case and adding value, which is quite often saving time. Or helping reveal something that would have taken a longer conclusion to get to. And then, all the way on the other end of the spectrum, I think, one of our clients is IBM. We do a lot of work with them on the cognitive business. And I think one of the reasons why the promise of AI is so prevalent with CMOs is, if you ever turn on CNBC, I guarantee you're going to see, Watson out there doing something, fixing a plane, or, saving a vineyard somewhere. And the truth is that while those are very real applications of AI, they're also very long, intensive projects with lots of resources and lots of investment. So I think we're at an interesting place where we're at the really small utility type opportunities as well as like these forward-reaching things, and the middle is going to get filled out over the next few years.
So you guys are talking about two various applications of AI. One is the back end. How does it make your life easier? How do you work smarter? How do you bring creativity into it? And then you have the client-facing side, dealing with the buzzword bingo and them calling you because they want AI, whatever that means. And you ask 12 clients, you get 12 definitions of what that means. The same thing applies when it comes to figuring out who the right partners are, right? Everybody has spoken to that company that claims to be driven by AI, but it's a guy in Wisconsin in the basement sort of answering your questions or answering your inquiries. How do you sort out those partners and potential partners from ones that you don't want to recommend?
I think the process starts with why are you talking about AI? What's the goal you're trying to achieve? There's the metaphor of when you have the hammer in your hand, everything's a nail. And we're seeing that a lot now where everybody's like, oh, we got to put Watson on it. Or it's like the next silver bullet that is going to ride in and save the day. And it comes back to, well, what are you trying to do? And can it help you achieve that goal? And there's times when it really can, and there's times it's like, no, you just have to do your job and do it right. And often there's this desire to cut corners, and this is a mechanism to do that. So the process that I think probably everybody would agree is, well, bringing customer centricity to the CMO is a big part of it, and AI can really enable that to happen. And there's a lot of vendors that can do that. And I think depending on what you're trying to do, you can build your own systems to do that, which is what the more enterprise solutions are about, or you can buy a solution which is more of a standard vendor approach. A lot of people are choosing to test and learn with the buy, like insert it into a line item in a media plan and try it out. But the more sophisticated brands are realizing that it's a really internal function of their customer centricity, tying it to their customer data, understanding how it fits in with CRM, how it impacts the experiences, and then how does media become impacted in that regard. And so, to answer the question, how do you pick your partner? Well, you got to ask, what are you trying to do?
I liken it to if most of us were we were all in this similar space with data 3 years ago. Big data, and everyone was rushing to get big data. Hey, I have data, and I think that's where we're at. We're at this wonderful discovery stage, but there is a cliff that's coming up, because what's going to happen is there's going to be a whole bunch of people who try out a form of AI, and then they throw their hands up and say that it doesn't work. So in 2 years, we're all going to be up here saying, so why didn't AI work? But it actually is, just like data is working, but it's none of this is simple, and I think, thank God, because we all have careers of it, let's be honest, of sorting through vendors and finding the right solutions. But I think that's just the natural case of where we're at, is the sorting through and finding out what works and trying to simplify it, because everything is it's really wonky right now out there.
Yeah, I think there's something too with picking partners for this that is about just the responsibility that we have to consumers and to the end user. That with AI is, I think, more important than a lot of other, ad tech buzzwords in the past, because we are feeding these brains that are getting smarter and smarter. And it's not to say that startups can't be as great a player as kind of the more established platforms, but I think that's just a big, more philosophical question of what is the mission behind these startups that are out there, and why are they getting into this space, and what will they do with this data that they're gathering? It's just a big responsibility to the end user to make sure that we're kind of protecting that information with vetted partners.
And I would just add, I think education's the first step, right? So, artificial intelligence, complex topic, right? Not everyone's an engineer in the room. So I think first breaking down, the phrase AI, which is really a catch-all for many different forms of computer science, is a first step. So understand whether you're talking about machine learning, understand whether or not you're talking about visual computing, and then within your own space, really get an understanding for who's majoring and minoring in your space versus saying they do AI. So if you're a retailer, really know who's got the goods in that space, and really kind of start there. Because I think if you kind of go and chase after the shiny object, you could be looking at a multi-million-dollar 3 to 4 year roadmap, which is fine for some companies, but for others, family-owned businesses, et cetera, narrowing that field of potential partners will just help you get there faster. And I think the big data thing is interesting to me, because I don't know how many people in the room feel that they have clients or their brands or their companies are still have big data figured out all the way. Are you really leveraging and connecting all the points in big data? And so here now comes another opportunity, which, by the way, relies very, very heavily on massive data sets to be effective. And so to sum up, education on the technology, and then education on the vendors kind of supporting your specific vertical with expertise.
So when you talk about education, is there something that when you meet with companies, you feel like you always have to wait for the pitch to be done and then ask the same question? Do you wish there was something that they disclosed earlier in the conversation ever?
I spent 13 grueling years as a salesperson, so in radio, my God.
Scars to show it.
I know. I made it, everyone. I made it. But I actually, it's very funny. A few years ago, and I do this with all my vendors, is I tell them up front, I start off the pitch. I say, this is what I'm doing. These are the things that I've already feel I figured out. Now go. And I think it changes the conversation, because absolutely, I don't want to already have that bias and shut them off by saying, oh God, I already do this. So I'd rather use the time, because for some reason, everything gets done in 30 to 60 minutes. So I want to use that valuable time to say, don't talk about this, but let's talk about this other stuff. And I think for me, it's bode me well. Hopefully my competitors don't steal it, Voss, but
Thanks for the tip.
Yeah, there you go. But I think as important of us trying to help figure out our clients, I think we have to help figure out the vendors, saying, what, this is duplicating what's kind of my green space. And I think that I'm very open to kind of disclose that early on versus having to sit through another pitch.
I totally agree. I think that, like you guys are saying, AI is such a catch-all term that there can be so many applications of it. So setting that context early on will just make for a more valuable and pointed conversation, and kind of hopefully use everybody's time to the best. So I agree. I think that context setting early is key for just a good vendor conversation.
And just to kind of button it up, if you can kind of brief the vendor on kind of, again, what your overall business objective is, what's interesting about what you saw to help move your business forward, I think that helps center the conversation. And then just like a watch out on the sales side, I think is, from what we saw in terms of the programmatic space, the idea of going in with the black box, I think, is less and less attractive to people on the buy side. Because of what we experienced in the programmatic space, and we're kind of getting to the point of peak efficiency in terms of real-time bidding and that type of thing. So I think the more you can kind of create a consultative relationship and one that's engineer to engineer, if possible, it helps get to kind of a more meaningful place.
I can tell you one pitfall to watch out for, and that's don't let them have your data. You want to make sure that you be able to have interoperability. So if you get stuck in a situation where your insights are not inside your platforms, then you're at a disadvantage. So when you're negotiating those things, make sure you understand how you can bring that stuff into what you're doing. If that's on the creative side or on the media side, it needs to be tied back to the user's preferences and the ability for them to manage that value exchange. And I think increasingly that's going to become more important as consumers themselves become more knowledgeable about how they can impact how AI makes their lives better. And as brands evolve their strategies of using this technology, they need to be able to manage that either directly with the consumers or through marketing partners.
So now that we're talking about tactics here, I want to focus on one of our favorite buzzwords after AI, transparency. I'm sure you guys have talked about that a lot. How do you manage that? How do you understand your partners? How do you work through that so it's not a problem later on with your clients? How do you handle transparency with potential partners that you want to work with?
I think it depends on the nature of the client. I mean, you can pass that directly through. Sometimes clients really want to be involved in it. Other times they are seeking you to solve that problem, and you really don't care. They just want the results. We often try to be as authentically transparent as possible. I just had to say both there. It's a good double buzzword bingo. But some clients are like, well, I want to know exactly what's going on inside the box. Other people are just like, no, I want my Q1 results to kick, right? So again, it depends on what you're doing. But I think at the core of that notion is, what am I as a consumer getting out of it? Why should I care? How do I get out? How are you using my data? How are you targeting me? All those questions, which are opening this notion of the ethical side of this, are increasingly important. And I think transparency equates to doing the right thing for the user, and that doesn't necessarily correlate with some of the business objectives.
We're going through a wonderful exercise working in the UK market with their GDPR. So it's a privacy notice that's going to take place in May. And if you actually uncover it, it's not as engrossing except for all the lawyer bills that everyone's incurring. But if you, just as you were saying, it's like you disclose what you're going to be doing, you allow them to be forgotten if they want to, and you'll give them a benefit if their benefit is needed. And I think the more we're up front and just have these guiding principles out there, the better. And I think that's the best way. And unfortunately, there are bad actors out there. There's a lot of bad companies that have been burned by trying to get scale that way. But I think the more that we can just be up front and saying, this is what we're going to be doing with the data, and this is how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that it is about full disclosure early on, and also just holding our applications of AI to things that benefit the end user. We're in such an important position in kind of being the safeguards to their information in so many ways, that the more we're kind of holding whatever execution or whatever work that's using AI to be more relevant for an audience, the better, because ultimately if we're doing something with what's best for them in mind, hopefully that's helping to kind of protect their information and maintain that transparency to the degree that makes sense for them.
One metaphor, I mean to cut you off, but just one metaphor that people are talking about, back to the big data thing, is this notion of aggregating your data, and this term, the lake, this big data lake is often thrown around. I actually think it's a swamp, and it's not actually a lake. It's really messy, and AI lets you drain the swamp.
Prolific. So a lot of people in this room, after this event is done, they're going to go back to their offices and they're going to be on one side of the desk. They're either going to be pitching their wares or they're going to be listening to that pitch and giving their feedback. What is the one piece of advice, to wrap this, that you would give to people who are on either the vendor side or on the vetting side of how you can make this successful for everybody involved, and really talk to that transparency, talk to those opportunities, not just waste the 30 to 60 minutes giving the pitch and the car salesman component of, but how would you change that conversation to make it more successful for everybody?
I'll tackle that one. I think the one piece of advice I would say is really, again, I would just reiterate what I said earlier, which is to get educated and to make sure everybody in your team is educated, and that you're starting your search and you're not kind of wasting your time meeting with people who are, you know, going to give you that, I tried AI and it didn't work. Because the chances are, I do think that there's use cases and applications across verticals, across brands, whether that's recipes, whether that's text analytics, whatever it might be, you know, but finding that right partner and finding that partner who's going to be adaptive enough with their service model and with the way they do business to kind of work with you and to create something net new is something that's difficult to find. So I think having a clear objective of how you want AI to benefit your business and then working backwards from, does everybody on my team understand what I'm doing and trying to accomplish here? Does the sales rep know what I'm looking for, and does he have the right people in the room, or is he just, you know, kind of riffing off of a PowerPoint? It's a heady conversation, and it's a long road. So, you know, it's kind of like measure, what do they say, measure twice, cut once kind of thing. Preparation is really key for these meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I think preparation is awesome and good, and you know, because AI is such a big catch-all term, I think that going into those conversations with a little bit more of a point of view on how AI might be applicable to your client's business or the audience you're trying to connect with, just to focus it in a little bit more will be beneficial to both sides, because I think the danger is that we do make it such a catch-all term that it starts to become a little bit meaningless. So in these conversations, having it more pointed already to how can AI be a tool to create a better experience for the end user, that's kind of what we are holding ourselves to, and has helped to just focus conversations a bit more.
I think everyone has, on dealing with vendors, I guess, you know, the way I'm kind of looking at for potential vendors, I really think that the visual component is going to be very key. I think the voice is great, but I made a comment earlier this year that I think Max Headroom is going to be AI. I mean, that is going to be an awesome AI someday, and it was ahead of its time, but it's really going to be something that can take in, because AI can't be creative and it can't be empathetic. And if it does, then, oh my God, it will take over the world. But until that time, I think those are the two key components for me that I look for to sort out what next tasks are we going to be looking at in this realm. So.
I'd say it's a journey, not a destination. Kind of like marriage. You know, you're always working at it. It never gets any. It never goes away and is an answer. It's part of where you need to go, and that means it's hard, and it doesn't necessarily just become easy because, you know, you put an AI on it, right? It's unlocking this complexity of today's marketing ecosystem, and I think it's at the core of the modern language of the CMO.
And with that professional and personal advice, we're going to turn over to you guys for questions that you have.
Stand by.
Thank you. It's interesting to me, first of all, we haven't really talked about third-party data sharing. And it seems to me the problem of transparency comes in here when you think about using AI as a vehicle for sharing third-party data. And the opportunities are amazing, but the problems, I think, are just as large. How do you deal with the issue of data sharing when you're dealing with the dynamics of artificial intelligence?
Well, you have to set up an ethical framework that enables you to be transparent about the value of that data. I mean, if you look at it, we can track where you are, what you bought, who you like, where you got around. Some of that data is accessible and purchasable. Some of it's freely traded. Some of it is given to us with consumer intent. And so sophisticated brands build that framework into their engagement. They work that into how they buy media, and that cuts across all the platforms.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting. If you look at privacy policies of companies that are connecting, if you look at privacy policies of companies that are connecting to Alexa or Google, they're the same as the ones they use on the web and on apps. There's no difference. And so the leakage